Okay, welcome back to Mangging for my primer, somewhat, my reading really, of Dungeon Crawl Classics, the role-playing game. So far we've discussed, well, quite a bit. At this point, you are certainly capable of doing a funnel. Really, you don't even need to know about the classes to do a funnel. All you need to know about is how to make level 0 characters and the basic roles and things like that. But to go a little bit more into detail, especially with relation to combat, there is a whole chapter devoted to combat and to different types of equipment. Things like that. So even though, yeah, you probably could do a funnel, we're going to go into detail now on some other things before we get to magic. So there's also skills. Here, I'll try to show this because this is pretty funny. So here's the skills chapter. As you can see, chapter skills, and then you get you turn the page. And there's a bunch of info about skills. And then you turn the page, and you're on equipment. So the skills chapter is 2 pages. So, yeah, I already kind of explained skills at one point, but just to recap, there's no list of skills. This is a skill-less game. I don't know what the word for that is, but there's no list of skills. It's free form, which is, in my opinion, always the way to go at this point. We rarely play a game that has a list of skills. And so your level 0 occupation sort of determines your skill set, if you will. There are things inherent to every character. Every character can sort of every character can attempt anything, really. But there are some stuff that's like, climbing or breaking down something or searching. Searching is pretty much everybody. Those are sort of available to everybody, but otherwise more specific stuff is related to your level 0 occupation. So to sort of give a general example, let's see here. An animal trainer. So any sort of check related to really almost anything related to animals, natural, mundane animals, you might be able to argue as an animal trainer. And even some abstract stuff related like this way to animals, you might be able to get a +2 out of it. A blacksmith, an armor, things like that. Anything related to crafting stuff. Like weapons, armor, you probably could argue you're trained in that, or metallurgy, things like that. Anything very specifically just related to what you do, obviously you're going to be trained in it. So if you are a cheese maker, you probably know how to make cheese. If you are a grave digger, you know how to dig graves. It's a very freeform thing, so there's not going to be a list. They don't provide any sort of list of what skills each occupation is going to know. That's open to interpretation between you and your judge. But if your character is trained in a skill, they would have a good chance. They've done it before. They have knowledge of how to do something. They get to roll a d20. Otherwise, you roll a d10. If you have no knowledge of how to do something, you've never done it before, or you have no proper training in it, or anything like that, it's a d10. But if it's somewhere-ish in the middle, you get a +2 bonus. So if it's something, maybe you can sort of weasel your way into, look at this connection in my head that I've made. Maybe you can get a +2 if your judge agrees to it. But that's pretty much it. It's either a d20, a d10, or a d10 +2. And you're trying to achieve, obviously, depending on the type of activity, the type of check, you're either adding your strength mod, agility mod, intelligence mod, personality mod, so on and so forth. And maybe there's some other factors related to it that might give you another bonus or minus. And then the judge sets a difficulty check, or a difficulty class for the skill, so somewhere between 5 and 20. Generally 5, you don't really require a roll. That just slows down the game. It's not very interesting, and it's just sort of infuriating to have some really basic shit that your character fails at because LOL random. You know, it's just, I've never found that very funny, and it really, yeah. But, you know, if it's something that would be normally really easy, but due to other factors in the situation, it is perilous, or it has, like, significant consequences for failure, yeah, there might be a DC 5 check. And you'll still feel shitty for failing it, but, you know, you don't just always say, oh, yeah, it's fine, you got it. You know, sometimes there are situations. But yeah, generally DC 10 is sort of the benchmark, and then you sort of adjust it from there, I guess. And if you're opposing somebody, then you both roll checks, and whoever rolls higher wins. Pretty simple. So that's skills. Alright, so equipment, the equipment chapter. Every level 0 character starts with 5d12 copper pieces, and the money system goes... It's a 10, 10, 10, 10 system, which is always the best. So 10 copper pieces is 1 silver piece. 10 silver pieces is 1 gold piece. 10 gold pieces is 1... what do they call it? I don't even know if they put it here. Oh, electrum. Yeah, 1 electrum. And then 10 electrum is 1 platinum. In my experience, playing these types of games, we always just jump from gold to platinum. Electrum is just such a weird, okay, whatever type thing. In which case, just 100 gold pieces is 1 platinum, which is usually, you don't usually need to divide it like that much. And so you just do copper, silver, gold, platinum. But electrum is there if you so wish. And then we have weapons. So there's a table of weapons. It's not like a huge list here. It's basically all the old standbys you'd expect. The axes, the clubs, the daggers, the swords, spears. You know, there's a few different for each category. They do different damage numbers. The highest is a lance at 1d12. And it inflicts double damage on a mounted charge, but a lance can only be used mounted. Which means, I guess, when you're using a lance, it's not really a d12, it's a 2d12. But you have to be on a horse or similar apparatus. But otherwise, 1d10 is usually the highest for polearms and two-handed swords, things like that. A garrote, or a garrote, or whatever, I've never known how to pronounce that, is a 3d4, which is pretty good. And I think that's for backstab damage. Yeah, because otherwise it does 1. So obviously it's a backstab weapon. Daggers normally a 1d4, backstab it's 1d10, stuff like that. Blackjack is 2d6 for backstab, or sneak attack, however you want to say it. And some of the weapons have range, they all have a cost in money and gold and so on and so forth. There's a few things for ammunition, nothing too exciting. And then armor. So again, DCC has an ascending armor system, so the higher your AC, the better, because that's the number you're trying to beat when you're attacking something. So higher is better. So unarmored just gives you +0. It's not anything. Padded armor gives you +1. And then you keep going up from there. Leather, studded, scale, half plate, full plate. And it keeps going up by 1 each time. But starting with leather, which is +2 AC, you get -1 to your check penalty, or your check penalty is -1. So basically, the heavier the armor you wear, you have a bigger penalty to any sort of like physical activity. So this is climbing, jumping, balancing, swimming, moving silently, and if you're casting spells, it also applies to that. So spellcasters generally just wear like padded armor. But if you want to be a little bit more cautious as a spellcaster, you might take like leather or studded leather. You take a -1 or 2 penalty, but maybe you want the AC. You're pretty fragile. So yeah, if you're in full plate, you have +8 AC, which is pretty nice, but your check penalty is -8. So anytime you're doing really anything physical other than combat, you are taking a -8, which is astounding. But you are a tank, so you got that going for you. And starting with scale mail and going up, you take a penalty to speed as well, which makes sense. You move a little slower. And also, you can always wear a shield, as long as you're not using a two-handed weapon. So, shield gives you +1 AC on top of everything else, but also a -1 check. So, you could be a wizard with a shield. Additionally, there's also the fumble die. So, when you roll a critical fail in combat, you roll on the fumble table. And this is modified by your luck. It's actually reverse modified by your luck. So, if you have a positive luck modifier, you subtract it from your fumble roll, because lower results are better. You want to roll low on the fumble table. So it's reverse luck. And if you're unarmored, you roll a d4. So, you know, if you have a +3 luck mod, which is awesome, and you are unarmored and you fumble, you're pretty much always going to get the 1 result, which is the best. I think it's just like you miss. Like, it's really almost nothing. But as you go up in heavier armor, you start rolling a d8, a d12, or a d16. So you're much more likely to have a more catastrophic effect when you critically fail in combat, depending on your armor, because you're just so you're so likely to just have some massive fuck up. Because you're clumsier, you're a bit more awkward. You're not fluid and bouncy. So that's armor. Also, full plate armor costs 1,200 gold pieces, which is quite a bit of copper. You're not going to see that anytime early on in the game. There's also a table of some basic equipment. This table is rolled on when you make a character. Level 0, it's a D24 table. So you get 1 piece of this equipment. I already mentioned this. This is stuff like rations, ropes, thieves' tools, crowbars, so on and so forth. And they have some prices for mounts. You know, the price of a horse is 75 gold pieces, a saddle, a donkey, so on and so forth. And that's the equipment chapter. It's pretty damn short. Alright, moving on to combat in general. It's pretty simple. A combat round is 10 seconds long. Normally it's 6 for a lot of games that I've played, but here it is 10 seconds, and there's also a turn. A turn is out of combat, and a bunch of spells and other things use the term turn. A turn is 10 minutes. So 2 turns is 20 minutes, so on and so forth. So there's rounds in combat, there's turns outside of combat. When you get into combat, there might be a surprise. So if there was an ambush involved or something like that, there might be a surprise round, in which case the people that have been surprised do not get to act at all during the first round. So basically the surprisers get a free round of combat. But there's an initiative check, So this is just a D20 modified by your agility. But warriors also get to add their level to it, so they get better initiatives, as I mentioned. But if you're using a two-handed weapon, you actually get to roll a D16 instead of a D20, which is pretty interesting. I've never seen that before. If you're using a two-handed weapon, you are more likely to go slower in combat. So rather than affecting your check, penalty, or your speed, they just do a little bit of modifying to initiative. It's not like you can't go first, it's just you're less likely to. So, depending on the combat, you might roll initiative for each individual entity in the combat. Other times you might just roll once for, like, a whole group of things. So, like, during a funnel, you might roll just once for all of your level 0 characters. And if the judge is using, like, a big pack of goblins or something, he might just roll once for all the goblins, for all the enemies of some type. And if there's, like, a couple different types, you might roll a couple initiatives for each one, or, you know, it's up to the situation, but in the end, you'll have a list of initiative order, and so it just goes down the line, and then it loops until something is done. So, each round in combat, a character gets a move. So a character can move their speed every round. This is, you know, pretty basic stuff. If you've played RPGs, I don't really have to go over this. But humans and elves get base 30 feet per round. Or per action, I should say. Not per round. Dwarves and halflings get 20 feet per action, but that can be modified by armor and stuff, encumbrance, other effects. So, at the start, you're going to have one action die. Most likely a d20, but as we've mentioned, some things might be a lower die, a halfling dual wielding, or something like that. But most of the time, it's going to be d20. And so you can move, and you can do something with your action die. You can use that action die as another move. So you could move as a human 60 feet per round, if you so chose. And different classes can use their action die on different things. This is generally self-explanatory. You know, everybody can make up an attack with a weapon. But, like, wizards can use their action die to cast spells instead. Like, it's really basic stuff. I don't really have to go over this too much. Thieves can use it on their skill checks. That's, you know, you get it. I'm not gonna go over it. I just want to double check something. Yeah, okay. But there are situations, as you gain levels, you are going to get more action die to use every round. And so a warrior can make 2 or 3 attacks per round with different dice. But, like, here for the wizard, your first action die can be used for attacks or spell checks. But your second and third, I guess, if you make it to level 10, but your second action die that you get at level 5 can be used only for spells. So you can't make 2 physical attacks per round as a wizard, but a lot of times you're going to be casting spells anyways. I don't want this to be too loud. Hold on. You gotta hear my voice. So, yeah. That's pretty self-explanatory, but you get a move, you get an action per action die, but probably for most of the time you're going to be playing DCC, you're going to have one action. It's possible here or there you might get, if you level up or something else, you might get more. But during a funnel, you're definitely going to have a move and one action that you're going to probably attack with. But there are also some other things you can do with that action available to everybody. These are sort of the other things you can imagine So, like, opening a door is an action, lighting a torch or lantern, standing up from a prone position is an action, drinking a potion is an action. But interestingly, so drawing or sheathing a weapon is an action. So if you do not have your weapons at the ready, keep that in mind. Your first round will be drawing your weapon, which is not very interesting, but, you know, things happen. To locate an item in your backpack is one action. To uncork a potion is one action. And to drink a potion is one action. So if you do not have a potion, like, at the ready, 3 actions to drink a potion in combat. So it's not exactly advisable. But if you have it on your pouch, or you have it on your belt or something, then you can probably bring it down to 2 actions, but that's still not great, just to drink a potion. But if it's life or death, who knows? So then, you know, you make your attack rolls in combat. If it's a melee, you're going to add your strength modifier, or subtract your strength modifier, from your attack roll and your damage roll. Again, it's usually a d20 for attack, but we've gone over different situations. You're trying to equal or surpass your enemy's armor class. And if you do so, you get to roll damage. Pretty simple. It's very basic. There's not a whole lot to say about that. If you roll a 20 on a d20, it is an automatic hit, and it is a crit. We'll get to the crit table in a second. If you roll a natural 1 on your d20, or on any die, I guess, it is a fumble and an automatic miss. So there are some also modifiers listed here for your attack roll. So a few of these are numerical. So, like, if you are invisible and you are attacking somebody in melee, you get a +2 to your roll. Assuming, like, they don't, like, this is in, like, a melee, and you suddenly turn invisible and try and hit them, you get a +2. You know, if you're invisible and sneak up on them, obviously, you just, like, crit them or something. But if you have the higher ground, you get a +1. And if you're behind cover, somebody shoots at you or something, they get a -2. You know, stuff like that. But there's also some things that subtract a die on the dice chain. So if you are entangled in a net and you are trying to hit somebody outside of the net in melee or something, or whatever, you get -1 on the dice chain. So instead of a d20, you roll a d16. Which, I don't know if that's equal to having a -4 to the roll. I don't know the math on that, but there are different... I mean, you go from a d16 to a d14, that's a little different. But yeah, you go -1 on the dice chain. And if somebody is trying to attack somebody else that's entangled in a net or whatever, they get a +1 on their dice chain. So they could go to a d24, which is great. Now, so if you're rolling a d24, you crit on a d20 on a 24. If you roll a 20 on a d24, that is not a crit. It's only a crit on a d20. If you roll... Hold on, sorry. If you roll a d16 in combat, you crit on a 16. That's how it works. So, you know, we normally always associate 20 with crits, but since this game sort of modifies the dice you roll for different things, for attacks and stuff, you always crit on the highest number of that die. So, okay, fumbles. Natural 1, fumble. So, as I said, you automatically miss. You roll on the fumble table. If you are a warrior or a dwarf, you can burn 1 point of luck to cancel the fumble roll. Meaning you still automatically miss, but you don't have some sort of catastrophic thing. But you have to permanently burn a point of luck. So it's a D16 roll. Well, I mean there's 16 results, or I guess there's 17 results. You roll. The dice you roll is dependent on your armor, as I explained, from a D4 with no armor up to a D16 with heavy armor. And this is modified by your luck modifier reversed. So if you have a positive luck modifier, it's going to subtract your number here. Negative modifier will increase it. So if you roll a 0 or less on the fumble table, you miss wildly but miraculously cause no other damage. It's the best fumble result. It's really almost nullifies it except for the miss. Then it starts to go up. A 1 is pretty much the same thing. A 2, you have to make a reflex save, otherwise you go prone. You get disarmed, a weapon breaks, your weapon becomes entangled in your armor. You give your opponent's bonus to their next attack. You take some penalties to your next attack. Most of these aren't really that terrible. But the worst result, if you get 16 or higher on the table, you strike yourself for normal damage plus 1. And you fall on your back. And you can't right yourself until you make a DC 16 agility check. Yeah, so that's real shit, because if you get 16 or higher, you're probably wearing heavy armor. And so I would assume your check penalty applies to that, so yeah, you're just sort of fucked, I guess. On the other hand, however, if you roll a critical hit, if you roll the max on your die for your attack, it's an automatic hit, and you get to roll on the crit table. So, for player characters, there are 5 different crit tables. So, the first table is for all level 0 characters and all wizards. So, wizards, even if they're level 10, they share the crit table with level 0 characters, because they're not meant to melee too much. Thieves, for their whole careers, and elves get their own table. Clerics, halflings, and level 1 or 2 warriors and level 1 to 3 dwarves get their own crit table. And then the rest are just for warriors and dwarves. So level 3 to 4 warriors, 4 to 5 dwarves get this table. And level 5 or higher warriors and level 6 or higher dwarves get the best crit table. The best crit effects, super high level, super rolls, basically just instant death. Like no save, you are obliterated. And you get to continue to make attacks against any foes within 10 feet until you miss. So you are just a bringer of death at that point. But that's really lucky, and that's pretty high level. So, but for level 0, you're just going through a funnel. You happen to get lucky and crit. You roll a D4 on the basic crit table here, and I do believe it is modified by your luck, normally, not reversed, because you want the higher effects. And so, yeah, basically, the most basic crit effect, you do plus 1d6 damage with your attack, but you are disarmed, because you, wrench your weapon into an enemy. Going up from there, you knock them prone, a lot of them do extra damage, you get a free attack, strike to groin, the foe must make a DC 15 fort save or spend the next 2 rounds retching. That's honestly one of the most memorable parts of our recent years of playing role-playing games was Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing, where I had sort of a a really in-depth custom critical hit chart that somebody had come up with. And one of the effects that did occur in like the first session we played was a critical hit to the bladder that caused the enemy's bladder to explode, and urine just seeped all over the place. That's what it was written in the crit chart, and that's just so memorable. We bring it up from time to time as just the ultimate critical hit is just causing their bladders to explode. So if I was playing this and that effect came up, I mean, that's what would happen. Their bladder would explode. So yeah, there's some good basic stuff here, but, you know, as a level 0, you're going to be rolling a d4. The highest effect you're going to get is level 7, or a number 7, where you inflict plus 2d3 damage, and you break 2 of the enemy's fingers. Which, if you're going up against an enemy that doesn't have fingers, I don't know. So really, the higher effects from there are just reserved for higher level wizards that are meleeing and get really lucky. Because even though there's 20 effects here, you don't roll a d20 necessarily. It's dependent on your level. Thieves and elves, obviously, they get better stuff, although not necessarily, because a 0 roll or less, if they're really unlucky, on a crit table means it says miss. Hesitation costs you the perfect strike. I don't know if that means they completely miss. That seems really shitty. Or if it just they don't get any sort of crit effect. That's probably how I would interpret it, because even a 1 gives you plus 2d3 damage. It seems really harsh to be like, oh wait, that wasn't a crit, that was a miss. I don't think most DMs would rule that. So it's just no effect really. No additional effect. But yeah, there's good stuff in there. You know, the highest effect here, which, you know, high-level thieves, strike through ear canal, enters the brain. Earwax instantly removed. Foe must make a fort save or die instantly. You know, pretty good stuff. So yeah, a lot of the higher effects are instant death with saves and stuff. But a lot of it is disarming, extra damage, prone, stunning, all sorts of stuff like that. There's a page here about mounted combat, but I'm not going to go over that. And then there's actually, like 4 pages here. Even more, like 5 pages just about Mighty Deeds of Arms, because they really want to go and explain all the things that you can do with Mighty Deeds of Arms. And they also give, like, examples if you're trying to do a blinding attack of any kind, or a disarming attack, a push, a trip, a throw, like a called shot to a specific body part. They have examples with different, like, deed die results. You don't have to follow this. You know, if your level 1 warrior does a blinding attack and he succeeds with his mighty deed, you know, you as a judge can rule however you want that it worked. You know, that they're blind forever. If they're permanently blind, if that's how you want to rule it, go ahead. But here, you know, they sort of scale it as a suggestion. So if you just roll a 3, the bare minimum for the deed die, they just get like a -2 penalty on their next attack. And even with like their highest example for blinding, they're blind for the next 24 hours, and if they fail a fort save, they're permanently blind. So it's up to you. You can scale it however vicious you want the warrior to be in your game, but there's plenty of examples here. And they even give some specific deeds possible with different weapon types. So battle axes, flails, warhammers, stuff like that. Okay, so if a individual reaches 0 hit points, they are dead. You know, I think if you want to decide not to kill an enemy, usually that's an option in most games. I don't know if they specifically mention it here. I mean, if you're a cruel DM, you might insist that they do, like, subdual damage. They have to use some sort of attack, specifically, that would not be, like, deadly. A lot of games, a lot of DMs, judges, GMs, whatever, just sort of hand wave that, and they're just like, "Oh, he dropped a 0. Do you want him dead or do you want him to live?" Like, "Oh, we want him alive." Okay, he's alive. But some might be a little bit more strict about that. It's up to you. So, a level 0 character that reaches 0 hit points is irrevocably killed. Done. No saving a level 0 character. Get over it. But from then on, for every level that you have one level to stay alive before you are dead. So at level 1, if you reach 0 hit points, you have 1 round in which someone can save you before you are dead. This is obviously a nice little thing that makes you a little bit more survivable at later levels. So, you know, you're level 5, dying just instantly would suck. But 5 rounds to have someone come over and hopefully heal you is a little bit better. Basically, if you get any sort of healing as you lay dying, then you return to 1 HP. Oh, you get healed to whatever it is. So whatever the heal is, you basically start at 0 and then it heals on top of that. And so if you survive that, you get a permanent loss of 1 point of stamina and some sort of scar, however they decide. But they are a little lenient here, and some people think this is too lenient, but basically there's this rule here called recovering the body, where if you don't save them in the 1 round or 5 rounds or whatever, and you wrap up everything and you go over to a person's body and you basically roll them over and see if they're still alive miraculously. As long as it's within 1 hour, which most of the time you're not going to wait longer than that. And so the dead person may roll a luck check to see if they are actually miraculously alive and not dead. They are stunned or knocked out or unconscious, whatever. And so if they succeed on the luck check, then they are alive. My God. If they fail, they are dead. So if you do survive from that effect, you get a permanent -1 to strength, agility, or stamina. Randomly determined. But that's not really that big of a deal. The problem with this is that I've not played this, you know, I've never had this happen yet, but the problem I've heard is that people that are just like, oh, I'm not dead, I burn this many luck points, and boom, I'm alive, I'm stunned, I'm whatever. And so it's always just like a luck burn just to survive, and some people don't like that, because it's just so ridiculous that all these bodies are just getting rolled over, like, whoa, he's miraculously alive. I mean, sometimes you're not going to have enough luck, you roll really shitty or whatever, but I've heard the house rule of not allowing luck burn on that check. It's up to you. It depends on how brutal you want to be. If you want people to continually stay alive, you want the same characters for a while, and, you know, they really got screwed by some shit and whatever. Who knows? Or if you just want to be by the rules. Yeah, that's it. So healing, if you get a good night rest, you heal 1 HP. If you spend the entire day doing nothing but resting, you heal 2 HP. That is not additionally. It's just, you get 2 or you get 1. Depending on how much you rest. So, yeah, there are some critical effects that can happen to you from enemies that will stick around for a while. Basically, you don't recover from a critical effect. Like, some enemy might hobble you and reduce your speed. You don't recover from that hobbling until you recover the damage that crit did. So if it was a hobble and 6 damage, you don't recover from the hobble until you've restored 6 HP. Ability points, if you've lost any other than luck, it's the same thing. It's 1 point per night, or 2 points for a whole day of rest. Then there's saving throws, fortitude, reflex, willpower. Nothing really interesting there. Morale. So I've played a few games now with morale checks, but basically any sort of enemies you're encountering, if something... There's a few different times during the combat when the enemies have to make a morale check, and if they fail, then they might flee or something like that. So, if it's a group of enemies, whenever the first one is killed, and when half of them have been killed or incapacitated, both times, I guess, they make morale checks. If it's just a single enemy, when it's lost half its hit points, it makes a morale check to see if it keeps fighting. And if it's like a hired help, if it's somebody you've hired to fight with you, whenever they first encounter combat or some sort of trap in each adventure, and at the end of each adventure. So, even though you've successfully finished, they may be like, I'm done, man. I'm out. Enjoy your shit. So yeah, it's pretty much just a will save and so on and so forth. There might be modifiers depending on the situations, and some monsters are immune to morale checks. Now, here's the interesting thing. You may recall, actually you probably don't, but I'm here to remind you, way back when we first started reading this book, many moons ago, there was a chapter here where it mentioned the differences between this game and some other games. And the first thing was, DCC RPG does not have prestige classes, attacks of opportunity, feats, or skill points, right? Which is very common to a bunch of Dungeons & Dragons editions. Now, the one that I want to focus there on is attacks of opportunity. This comes in different flavors, but most generally that I understand, an attack of opportunity is when you are in combat with somebody, generally melee combat, and you attempt to move out of their threat range. So you're fighting somebody with a sword or something, and you start just backing off, or you turn and run or something like that, and they get a free attack on you. Or if you have a bow and somebody is up in your face with a sword and you try and shoot them with the bow, they probably get a free hit on you. Or you are casting a spell right in their face and you gotta like chant stuff and they just slash with their sword for free. That's an attack of opportunity. That said, this game does not have attacks of opportunities. But right here, in this little box here, it says, once a character is engaged in melee, he cannot back away without opening himself up to attack. If a character or monster withdraws from an active melee, whether to retreat, move to a new position, or attempt some action, his opponent immediately receive a single free attack. I mean, maybe you don't want to call it an attack of opportunity, but that's pretty much what it is. I mean, sometimes an attack of opportunity has more qualifications, you know, more specifically, whereas this is specifically just withdrawing. I don't know, but for all intents and purposes, it's right there in the combat section. If you attempt to leave a melee, they get a free hit. Okay, so there's a bunch of other combat rules. This is all sorts of the other little minor stuff that might come up, such as characters on fire. You can charge into combat, falling damage, firing missile weapons into melee, grapple checks. You know, grapple checks are usually some of the most confusing stuff, but here it's literally like one paragraph, very simple stuff. Okay, it's 2 paragraphs. Screw me. Recovering arrows, subdual damage, unarmed combat. You know, all sorts of little stuff. It makes up like 3/4 of a page. There's not a lot here. But it's everything you need to know. Then it talks about turning unholy enemies using the cleric. I don't know why exactly this thing is in this section. It seems a little annoying, but yeah, if you're looking for a whole table... See? Here's the Turn Unholy by Hit Dice table. That's in the combat section, not the cleric section. So, depending on your spell check and depending on how much hit dice the enemy has, it does different effects. Okay, moving on. We're at 46 minutes, great. Spell duels. So this is actually quite a bit. There's like 6 pages related to spell duels. I'm not going to explain it all here. Because if you're doing spell duels, you've already read this book. I don't need to explain it. But basically, to sum up, a spell duel is when there are 2 opposing spellcasters in a combat. And one spellcaster begins to cast a spell. And another spellcaster says, I'm going to interrupt that spell. I'm going to counter that spell. Counter spell! And so the counterer, the one who it counters, jumps up in the initiative order. It wasn't his turn, it was the guy casting the spell. It was his turn. But the other guy jumps up in initiative order just to counter the spell. And so basically, the one that is countering has to counter with a spell that makes sense to whatever the first guy was casting. So if the guy casting Fireball, that spell is probably not going to be countered by I don't know, Featherfall. Right? It doesn't make any sense. But you could counter it with another Fireball. You could counter it with some sort of ice spell. Really, you could almost counter it with any sort of attack spell. And, elements, obviously, have their thing. You know all about that. There's, like, certain arcane things. So, like, Magic Shield might be countered by Magic Missile or vice versa, obviously. And if you cast Invoke Patron, you try to invoke your patron to cause some effect, another spellcaster could counter it with their own Invoke Patron. And so you got 2 patrons clashing. So it's a cool system. There's a lot of info, very detailed, to solve a whole spell duel. Like I said, I'm not really going to go over it. But basically, it's not necessarily like a one and done. It's not like an opposed skill check. There's there's a lot of tables. You see the tables? Yeah, it's like a continuous thing until somebody just ends. I think. I mean, I don't know. I'll let you read it, but, it's a spell duel. It is determined by how well each one does on their spell check. If someone just completely outclasses one another, obviously, the spells are just going to go through one way or another. And so there's a table to determine how well either the attacker does or the defender does. Spells can be turned back on the caster, so you counter the fireball, they get hit with their own fireball. All sorts of different stuff can happen, but perhaps most interestingly, there's what's called phlogiston disturbance. So this occurs whenever the 2 casters roll the exact same number on their spell check. The forces of magic counter each other so harmoniously that there's just like an explosion of energy. And so you roll a d10 on this disturbance table, and there is some shit on this table, man. Both casters are instantaneously transferred to a pocket dimension, and they remain there until one is killed. In which case, the survivor is transferred back 1 millisecond after his departure. And there's a D6 table, or a D6 roll to determine where this pocket dimension is. So it's like a sweltering island in a sea of lava, a dust mote atop the point of a needle, the left nostril of an intergalactic whale. Like, it's crazy shit. Time accelerates. Both casters see everything around them slow down. In reality, they are accelerating, and surrounding characters see them move at incredible speeds. Resolve an additional 2d4 rounds of combat between the casters only. The casters are tossed backwards in time to relive the last few moments repeatedly. So you just keep doing like the spell checks for your spell duel until something horrible happens, I guess. Both can suffer corruption. Oh, here, a demonic invasion can occur. 1d4 randomly determined demons are summoned at the exact midpoint between the two casters. So you could have some type 4 demons pop out at like level 1. What does a type 4 demon even like look like? How beastly is it? I gotta see. I mean, obviously we'll get to the bestiary later. Oh, here's a type 4 demon. It's got plus 12 attack bonus, or plus 16 for a bite, 3d8 plus 6 damage, 22 armor class, and it's got 10d12 hit dice. That means it's got like... it's got like 100... No, it's got like 60 HP or something like that. And it knows a few spells, including Choking Cloud. Oh, and it can swallow targets, trapping them in acid and constriction, taking 2d8 damage per round. So, at level 1, you could have some crazy spell duel that summons 4 of those fucking things. Yeah. Well, welcome to DCC. So yeah, spell duels seem pretty cool. Yeah, so I think you do... Okay, so, yeah, like every counter spell is going to have a specific effect, right? So some spell is going to go through, or some sort of disturbance is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But depending, you keep track of, like, the momentum of each spellcaster. So if they continue to counterspell each other, like, their momentum during the spell duel will continue to carry over. And so if someone just keeps on crushing somebody else, they're going to get much more likely to do really damaging stuff, like turn a spell around on somebody. But if two are pretty evenly matched, you're probably not even really going to perfectly counterspell something. Even if you sort of win, you might just like lessen the effect, which is better than nothing. But remember, you're spending your whole turn to counterspell. That is your action for the turn. So it might not always be the right thing to do, but it's pretty cool. This is pretty cool stuff. All right, so that's going to wrap us up for today, actually, because the next chapter is magic. Look at this artwork. Magic. Oh, look at all that stuff. Yeah, so magic, obviously I'm going to get pretty giddy about, because there's some really cool stuff in here. It's definitely the most interesting aspect of the whole RPG for me. So, definitely one to look forward to. We get to talk about Spellburn, oh man, and Patrons, and Mercurial Magic, oh my god. Could do a whole video on that. Anyways, yeah, cool stuff. My name is Mang. This has been Roll Manging for a primer on Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I'll see you fine folks in the next part.